A Valheim TSUNAMI is coming in 2026. I know it sounds weird, but you have to hear me out. I recently came across this graphic showing the 20 highest concurrently played games on Steam of all time. To no surprise, it had some heavy hitters. The timeless PUBG tops the list, popular games in China like Black Myth Wukong in second, and the infamous punching bag of Nintendo, Palworld, round out the top 3. More recently, the long-anticipated sequel to Hollow Knight, Silksong, asserted itself amongst the giants, and yet, all the way down at the bottom, closing in on 5 years since its early access release, a familiar face, Valheim. This tiny indie Viking game from a small studio in Sweden has stood the test of time and finds itself amongst the titans of the industry. And after seeing this, I had to ask myself, could this game break its own record and climb this leaderboard even further with its own 1.0 release and Deep North almost certainly coming next year? Well, spoiler alert, I think it will. I'll make my argument for why the best is yet to come for Valheim, but also consider the opposite point of view that Valheim's peak may have already come and gone. I'll let you decide for yourself. Is the Valheim TSUNAMI truly coming next year, or is it simply going to be another wave just crashing up against the rocks? And before we dive in, make sure you take advantage of the massive deal I have for you today with my code SNAZZYGAMES with today's video partner, NordVPN. Ever since I started building up my online presence, I've been more exposed to all kinds of phishing and scam attempts that could jeopardize my privacy and the safety of my family. This is where NordVPN helps me protect my data and identity by shielding me while I answer my emails, but also when I browse the web with their new threat protection feature that blocks dangerous ads and stops me from entering malware hosting websites. And I really love their password manager that remembers both my passwords and keeps them secure, because the number of passwords I must keep these days is getting out of hand. But maybe best of all, I get to keep access to my favorite TV shows when my wife inevitably drags me out of the country, as NordVPN allows me to stay at home virtually, no matter where our adventure takes us. My wife and I are really enjoying Task right now on HBO, definitely check that out. And if you're still on the fence, rest assured, as there's no reason not to try with their zero-risk 30-day money-back guarantee. Protect yourself today with my code SNAZZYGAMES, and get a massive discount on any 2-year plan, plus 4 free months to your deal, simply by clicking my link in the video description or pinned comment. We all know the story. Valheim came out of nowhere, rocketed up in popularity, and took the world by storm. In mere weeks and months, millions of copies were sold, and development costs for a full release all but secured. And with that success, Iron Gate Studios has never rushed. They could have chased trends, added battle passes, or pushed out half-finished content. But instead, they've taken their time crafting each biome with care. Every update feels like a leap in ambition. The Mistlands turned survival into mystery, the Ashlands brought hellish landscapes and siege warfare. Beyond adding new biomes, they've been fleshing out the existing experience too. New meads, food types, and tools with the Bog Witch, and a revamp to combat, new creatures, weapons, armors, and wicked new trinkets in the recent Call to Arms. Each step has felt deliberate and meaningful, which has become rare in gaming today. Rather than undergoing a hiring craze to crank out updates faster, they opted to keep the team small, tight, maintain the vision, and support the people behind the game we love, even famously throwing out a roadmap they were forced to produce in the first place. Valheim's not a game built to deliver your next dopamine fix. It's a game built to last. And based on the pedigree and reputation the Iron Gate team have been curating over the past 5 years, Valheim will come full circle with its 1.0 release most likely next year. The Deep North will be the last biome, allowing players to complete the full saga of the Fallen Warrior. It's not just another patch, it's the culmination of everything the Valheim studio has envisioned, rising from a tiny dream of a game previously known as Fed to the giant that it is today. While little is known of what to expect in the final update, a few teasers have been dropped here and there through the Chronicles of Hervor Bloodtooth, a small video series of a Viking landing in the Deep North for the first time. Through this series, we've seen frozen creatures, the sneaky King, and most recently, a first tease of a weapon we will likely be able to craft. Beyond that, here's hoping long-desired features and content are coming, like an extended ocean biome, an expanded inventory, and maybe, just maybe, the kind of endgame systems that keep players coming back for years. What bolsters the bull case further is that unlike the early access release, Valheim will be available on both Xbox and, with the September news, also PlayStation, with confirmation of a release on that platform in 2026. Through the addition of expanded platforms, more people will have access to the game than ever, which should easily bolster the game's numbers. But what matters perhaps most, and has become very clear to me as I have sunk my teeth deeper into the Valheim community these past years, is that even in the quiet months, the Valheim world does not go silent. You'd think that considering the significant gaps between content updates, that the game wouldn't have a consistent player base, but surprisingly, that's been far from the case. By checking the Steam charts from the last few years, you can see that while the fall off from the initial release is undeniable, there has been a consistent player base peaking at 30 to 40,000 players no matter the proximity to the latest update. In fact, this daily peak number seems to only be growing the past year or two. But what can we credit for this longevity? Well, I think a procedurally generated world certainly helps, keeping each playthrough fresh and as unpredictable as ever. Yet, maybe more than anything, the modding scene helped fill these gaps in development, and the limitless building mechanics allow players to keep pushing the ceiling of player creativity. Not since maybe Minecraft has a game come along with a building system that has captured the minds of builders across the gaming space. But before moving on to the negative case, I think it's wise we compare Valheim to other early access titles that have recently had their 1.0 releases. V Rising, as one example, fully released in May of 2024 and reached a height of about 90% of what it had at its EA launch. While having a shallower peak to Valheim, it did have a far shorter development cycle. Another is Core Keeper that did in fact exceed its early access peak numbers, but like V Rising, doesn't quite compare in size to a game like Valheim. And thirdly, and most recently, a game I'm currently playing and loving, by the way, is Abiotic Factor. This one, despite being a bit of a cult classic, beat its early access number by roughly 20%. While all of these games are different than Valheim and comparatively smaller, I mean, what isn't? They all follow a similar pattern. Each has big launches with periodic peaks with the arrival of new content, connected by valleys of lows in between. And Valheim is no different, with its own highs and lows. The key difference, however, is of course the magnitude and admittedly much slower development cycle. Considering the precedent set by similar early access titles, I think it's fair to say Valheim could easily meet or even exceed its early access launch. All that said, not all signs point up for Valheim either. There is no denying it. Valheim's explosive growth has faded. The adventure survival crafting genre has evolved. New contenders are offering fresh takes, like Enshrouded as one example, having its own 1.0 planned for next year. Grounded 2 just launched to huge popularity with a massive studio behind it and tons of resources that might make a small studio like Iron Gate weep. Not to mention all the previous games in a similar genre I mentioned earlier. Survival crafting games have become increasingly popular, competitive, and frankly, it's becoming a bit oversaturated. Players have more options than ever, and Valheim needs to do more to capture players' attention. And those attention spans have only shortened. The genre almost seems to be moving more in the direction of village simulation rather than action-adventure, with most Valheim competitors these days seeming to have some sort of simulation aspect. Aska, as one example, which I just played, clearly took a lot of inspiration from Valheim, but with a major twist. Rather than gather resources yourself and build, you have NPCs to do that for you. People just don't have the time or patience to chop wood or mine copper ore anymore. In other ways, Valheim has started to feel old as well. Many new players find it outdated, often lacking many of the quality of life features players of the game have become accustomed to in most modern survival crafting games. You can't auto-store materials or craft from nearby chests like in Grounded as just one example. Even I must admit, after going through a Grounded and Grounded 2 phase this past summer, it was a little jarring coming back to Valheim and having to withdraw my inventory before crafting. Sure, there are mods that can enable this for you, but that is just another barrier that the average player just simply isn't going to look into. Let's not forget also the special and absolute extraordinary circumstances that surrounded Valheim's early access release in February 2021 too. At the time, most people were locked within their homes at the peak of the pandemic. You can see this huge tick up in players easily by looking at the Twitch viewership with an incredibly steep spike in 2020 that honestly has maintained itself pretty well, but where did it peak? You guessed it, early 2021. Steam's overall numbers have also been climbing too, with again a huge spike in 2021 that has only continued to rise and never looked back. And yet, no matter the increase in popularity in platforms like Steam and Twitch, people are free now to leave their homes, life has generally returned to normal. To put it bluntly, for its 1.0 release, players just have so many more options to choose from. And we haven't even mentioned Valheim's price. There's a little known secret that Valheim's price was intended to be set at €20, but a currency conversion issue on Steam ultimately landed it at €16 and close to $20, an absolute bargain. Would it have sold as many copies at the intended higher price? I guess we'll never know. What we do know, however, is that the price of Valheim will most likely increase for 1.0 and therefore won't be able to benefit as much as it did for the EA bargain. Above all though, it is the perceived quality of the Valheim updates and more generally the design direction the game has taken since early access that could be its biggest hindrance in surpassing its previously established heights. While Valheim still maintains a very positive rating on Steam, it no longer maintains the coveted, overwhelmingly positive status it once had. In fact, of the 250,000 total English reviews on Steam, 94% of them are positive, while only 88% of the 3,000 recent are positive. A small decrease, I know, but definitely notable. Although, in many ways, it's not terribly surprising considering the reception of the two new biomes in the Mistlands and Ashlands since the early access release. Neither received as warm a welcome as the original 5, with many people infuriated by the lack of visibility and steep slopes of the mist, and the incredible difficulty of the ash. If we're being honest with ourselves, I think we can agree that Valheim has taken a turn from simplicity of its first 5. The Mistlands introduced a whole new combat mechanic in Eider and Magic, and the Ashlands gave us siege weapons of all things. And even smaller updates like the recent Call to Arms and last year's Bog Witch, that each added fresh content throughout the existing biomes, still came with their own complaints, although mostly were about inventory to be fair. Although to some extent, all of this can be expected. As the game reaches a wider and wider audience, it becomes far more difficult for the game to fit like a glove for any individual player. And to be fair, considering the glowing reception Valheim had at its own early access launch, expectations could not have been higher. Perhaps until now, with all eyes on the Deep North. Maybe perhaps the biggest hurdle for Valheim to overcome with its final release is not competition or price, but rather the absolute mammoth weight of delivering on a game that captured the hearts and minds of millions of players in 2021 and delivering a final and satisfying conclusion that not only meets, but hopefully exceeds players' lofty expectations. So what do you think? Will Valheim be the tsunami that washes over the gaming world, or is it just going to be another standard wave? Let me know in the comments below.